Hi everyone, and welcome to today's episode. So today's episode we have Emma Ingram, and we're going to be talking mainly about contracts and contract management. So the title of the episode is Tariffs, Tensions and Terms, and so sort of leaning into some of the nuances of the market at the moment and how these are impacting how contract management is approached really. So thanks for joining us, Emma. Appreciate your time. Do you want to give a bit of a background as of yourself and what you do?
Yes, certainly. Thanks, Luke. So, hi everybody. Emma Ingram. So, I've been a procurement professional for over 10 years. Main backgrounds associated with manufacturing over various industries, including foundry, medical device, automotive, and energy. And I say recently, I had my MSIT accreditation last year, which still hasn't sunk in, but it's still an incredible achievement to have. But again, thank you for having me today.
No worries at all. No, appreciate your time. So yeah, we'll get stuck into it then. So first question I had, and obviously it's a bit of a hot topic at the moment, is around tariffs. So how have, from your experience, the recent global tariffs and trade restrictions reshape the way you approach supply contracts management and negotiation?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think sort of before touch base in terms of the reshaping the way approaching suppliers, contracts and negotiations and all that good stuff. I think sort of taking a step back is going back to those basics. So what I mean by that is it's understanding the whole picture between what the supplier sort of wants and what the buyer wants. And I still think to this very day, it's very important to understand both positions of both sides before those negotiations. And I think it is still very important to especially have, for example, if we are negotiating tariffs, is having those BATNAs in place. So it encourages the buyer not to exceed those BATNAs, if that makes sense. So one example would be about caps. So I have been seeing in contracts lately that in the event of a tariff increase, it's for organisations, which I can understand is protecting their profits. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
It's to keep those caps in place, just so you've got that compromise there for both sides, and then B, it's also protecting the buyer because of those excessive increases, but it's also giving the supplier the opportunity to provide that evidence. So it's not where you'll just get a blank letter to say, oh, you've got a price increase coming in by X because of tariff costs. It's, well, provide us that data to back your price increase, in essence. So I am seeing that a lot more in contracts lately, just in terms of with the tariffs and even geopolitical factors as well. It's finding that middle ground between both sides, and it's also protecting profits from your side as well as the suppliers, because you don't want them to go bankrupt. So it's finding that balance, in essence. In terms of reshaping, it's ensuring you future proof your contracts in the first place to protect the organisation, which I've just briefly touched base on the tariff caps as an example. Trade restrictions, there's also all that good stuff, and geopolitical factors. Another thing I am seeing in agreements and contracts at the moment is where organisations have, say, the location in the Chinese region, is the option to relocate manufacturing sites. So I say manufacturing, I've sort of come from a direct background myself, so I appreciate if, I don't know, if you're in an indirect space, it's still having that option to relocate if necessary, but it's to try and sort of mitigate that risk with Chinese tariffs, in essence. So it is becoming more common. So I'm seeing Vietnam, Malaysia, even in Europe, there's manufacturing organisations locating to Europe to minimise that risk where possible.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Especially around the relocation and that element of it. As we know that the tariffs have been very uneven in terms of how they've been distributed. So yeah, I can definitely see how that plays a key part into it in order to try and mitigate that where possible from the supplier side of things.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely. And also, sorry, Luke, just to add, it's what's also been a breath of fresh air is that I've seen from other procurement professionals that their suppliers have had that ready as part of their business continuity plan for the last 3 years. So it's an absolute breath of fresh air to see those suppliers that they're one step ahead of the curve, saying, well, we have got a manufacturing site already ready to go in Vietnam, Malaysia, or in Europe. So it's that reassurance to the buyer that actually the suppliers that are well ahead of the curve, they're ready. So yeah, just give us your details, provide forecasts. Obviously, ensure you do those audits just to make sure that everything's the way that they should be. But it is a breath of fresh air to see suppliers, they are doing that. So it's very good.
yeah, no, that's great stuff. Thank you. So, sort of tying into that, what clauses in particular, or contractual strategies, do you think are becoming more common as a response to sort of like the volatility around tariffs and the instability in pricing? Do you think there's anything at the moment that you see more of?
Yes, so I think to sort of reiterate about the percentage with capping, I am seeing a lot of that in contracts at the moment, whereby that the buyer, to have that protection of the volatility of pricing, is having those caps in place with those suppliers. So example could be whereby if pricing were to exceed by, I don't know, 15%, just as an example, but then you've got that cap as 12% in your contracts. That's one way of sort of protecting your organisation from that volatility. I'm also seeing in contracts as well that some suppliers are inserting price clauses whereby they'll review them on a case by case basis, which that would promote the volatility, which us procurement professionals is not what we want. So one strategy is to utilise a price review clause whereby pricing would be reviewed by, I don't know, be biannually or annually, whatever really is the purpose for the contract and how those provisions will apply. But yeah, that's another strategy that I sort of take, is including, i.e., tariffs or trade restrictions within that price review clause. And then the third strategy is to limit the countries by tariff costs. So what I mean by that is, so it's with China being sort of the main hotspot at the moment, it's inserting in your contracts whereby it's only limiting to whatever countries the goods are being imported into. It's making sure you restrict to that country only and not keeping it broad in contracts, because it could open a wide can of worms, saying, oh, it doesn't specify the UK, it doesn't specify USA. Whereas if you're strict from the start at day one, i.e., future proofing your contracts, then you've got that protection there. Of course, subject to negotiations, but it gives you yourself a peace of mind, and also the suppliers, because it's meeting that middle ground, and then it's business as usual for the contract.
No, that's fantastic. And a third question, again, it sort of further builds on it. As you can see, we're sort of fleshing out the sort of theme here. So all these sort of changes that you've seen in that are driven by the volatility in the market, from tariffs, geopolitical tensions, etc. How do you think you've been able, or how do you think our listeners, if this is something that's affecting them, they are best positioned to balance cost protection whilst also maintaining those supplier relationships?
So I think it's sort of going back to what I said at question one, was is understanding the whole picture first before engaging those negotiations. So it would be understanding what the supplier wants, understanding what the buyer wants, and then it's being prepared to compromise. I think is the most important thing. So I think in essence, Luke, that what I'm trying to say is it's having those key relationships with your suppliers and for them
Yeah.
to see you as a favourable customer. So I think having that relationship is key. It certainly makes negotiations a little bit easier, having them strategic relationships in place with the supplier. But yeah, it's all about compromising as well. So I know that it will be, I don't know, say revision 2 of a contract negotiation, for example. There could be something that the supplier inserts, and you think, "Oh, I'm not keen on that." And then vice versa, could be the buyer could insert something that the supplier doesn't like. It's finding that common ground. So there could be inserts thinking, "Okay, I'm happy with this. I can accept that." And then same for the supplier. So it's sort of gaining them small wins at first, and then it gets you then in essence to those big wins, which sort of my negotiation tactics is I negotiate I'm not going to say easier because it's never easy, but the bargainings where you're likely to have wins first in essence, and then I save the harder negotiation topics at the end. So that's key, is having them relationships in place. And in terms of cost protection, it's setting those BATNAs. So again, it's what does the buyer want out of this? Setting those BATNAs in advance of your negotiation, and then you've got that comfort to say, if the supplier, I don't know, wants a cap of 10%, but then your BATNA is 8, then you sort of negotiate it out. Say, well, I'm sorry, but the furthest I can go down is 8. And then the supplier can say, okay, either we meet in the middle, can you compromise, but we'll give you this in return. So it's all the art in the negotiation more than anything. So it's, just to summarize, it's the relationships that are key initially before entering those negotiations, and it's setting those BATNAs in place to give yourself that bit of comfort before you enter those negotiations.
No, that's great. Thank you. That's some really, really good points raised there. I suppose a last question would be, and obviously tariffs, pricing volatility, inflation, and all that stuff. Obviously, it's very prevalent at the moment because of the various, things happening both politically and economically in the market. However, we've seen this similar sort of situations before with COVID, the Suez. It's not new for us, I suppose, is what I'm saying. So I suppose it's inevitable. Once we overcome these issues, there's going to be more down the line. So with that in mind, what advice would you give to procurement teams that, can try and future-proof their contracts against ongoing geopolitical disruptions, but so sort of what they can do to future-proof them and act a bit more strategically rather than tactically?
Yeah, I think that is a great question to ask, and yeah, I'd be more than happy to provide some advice for procurement teams and professionals out there. So I'd say the first advice would be specific with your provisions in the contract. So when I touched base earlier about limiting the country tariffs, so it's been very clear at the start in the contracts with the suppliers to say, well, we understand the challenges with the tariffs globally, but it's to protect our organisation and yours, is we need to limit them country tariffs. So again, when I spoke about being the goods coming in from the UK via China or USA, if there's no country that's specified in the contract, it's very broad. So it could open a can of worms of those commercial discussions that in the future you might not welcome. So that would be my sort of advice. And to piggyback onto that is, if you haven't already, conduct supply chain mapping to understand. So again, this is more aimed at directs procurement, is conducting that supply chain mapping to understand the origin of where your goods and all components are coming from. I think it's really key to understand that, because it sort of gives you that insight to where, I don't know, tier 2 suppliers, what goods are coming from India, or the tier 3 suppliers, the origin's Mexico. So I think having that mapped out is key, not only for the negotiation, but it's to understand where your goods are coming from, and potentially like it will also help you understand about the potential ethical risks and ESG and all that good stuff. So I think that's very, very key. To add to that, and it was a fact published by Supply Century a few years ago, that only 17% of suppliers that were surveyed have visibility of their tier 3 suppliers and beyond. So
Right.
think about that globally, 17 as in 1/7, that is tiny. It's
Yeah.
it's quite frightening. So I will encourage and must encourage you all out there who's listening, get down to supply chain mapping if you haven't already, to understand where your goods are coming from. It's very critical you do that. To carry on with advice is, if you don't have price review clauses in your contracts already, include them as soon as possible. And then to add to that, which I discussed about the tariff increases earlier, was I'd also include a clause whereby that the supplier must give you evidence of those increases, because again, you don't want to have a letter land on your desk saying there's a 10% increase without any data provided. And I know as procurement professionals, we love data. So it's ensuring that you have a provision that says, well, we need to understand where these increases are coming from, why they're increasing, and give us evidence basically of where those increases are coming from. And then last but not least, it's not really contract specifically. Well, you could argue it is engaging via SRM, supplier relationship management. So
Yeah.
if you don't have QBRs, MBRs in place with those suppliers, I'd get them in as soon as possible as well. It's a really good conversation and opportunity to have those discussions with your suppliers, to obviously to talk about performance and all that good stuff and quality and everything like that. But it's also the opportunity to talk about market updates and to understand really what is actually going on in the market, that the supplier may have that visibility where you don't. So it's engaging in SRM is critical, and having them really strategic relationships to support the SRM. So it's but that's really the main advice I can provide with all procurement teams and professionals out there is, yeah, getting all those into place. And last but not least is future proofing your contracts, which I think I touched based on question 2. It's very important you do that initially, and then it should protect you further with tariffs, trade restrictions, and geopolitical factors and all that good stuff.
No, that's fantastic. Thanks, Emma. And I think it is a bit of a weird market at the moment, and I think it's across all industries. And I think this is one of the topics I wanted to cover, because a bit like what you said earlier about the amount of essentially what tail end spend management ties into it as well. We all know that adds up. So it's how are we managing those correctly, as well as our tier 1s and 2s. Because at the end of the day, it all affects the supply chain in different ways. So yeah, no, it's been really good conversation, and I'm sure our listeners have found it very useful. So thank you very much for coming on. And appreciate your time. Thank you.
Yeah, and likewise, Luke, thank you for having me on today and the opportunity to discuss all the exciting stuff with contracts and tariffs. So it's on a absolute stunning sunny, it's still morning, just looking at the time, I thought it was afternoon. But no, it's but more than happy to have that discussion. But thank you again for having me.
No worries. Thank you very much.
No problem at all. Thank you.